everyone, and welcome to Can I Just Say? I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
And we're talking some more Jane Eyre, the adaptations today, which is going to be very exciting.
I know. I'm super excited. I got to say, though, before we start, I have been convincing people to reread Jane Eyre for the past month since we talked about Jane Eyre, the book. And thank you, Liz. I'm just so pleased that I reread it because I did. I'm very moved by this book. I want to reread it again now.
Yeah. No, it's so beautiful. I'm looking forward to reading it again also. The language itself is so gorgeous.
I know.
But even watching the adaptations, because they chose so many different scenes to sprinkle in, I would think, well, in the book, no, that did happen, and I'd just forgotten about it. So
right.
There were a lot of little things.
I kept looking stuff up because I have it on Kindle, so you can do searches.
Oh, that's so easy. Yeah.
This is a nice thing about Kindle.
Yes.
So I love paper books, but also I love being able to find a keyword in a conversation and then look it up and see if I can find that scene. Mm-hmm. So also, like all the talk about birds, we did not really talk about that. It ends
did
up
we
in,
not? That's
not
surprising.
So much.
That was in one of my notes, so that surprises me.
Oh, so maybe we did, and I didn't re-listen to our episode, so maybe we did, but I just was so struck
if we did,
by
we
how...
only touched on it. Yeah,
right,
but just the idea of how much they brought in the natural world, and birds specifically were used for Jane.
Right, maybe we did talk, because I definitely talked, like we talked about in the comparison between Rochester and St. John, about like how St. John is, kind of against nature and Rochester is shown as, someone who's interested. So maybe it did. I just was really struck in the adaptations. There were certain things that they all struck upon.
Yes.
Which was interesting. It's very interesting. It's a neat thing to watch multiple adaptations of the same story.
Uh-huh. It
and
really was.
See where they differ and where they're similar. Okay, but before we start for real, we should read some reviews.
We should, yes. Thank you again, everyone who leaves us reviews on iTunes. It really does help our podcast.
Yes, thank you so much. And, if you leave us reviews now, we'll be able to read it next time. Mm-hmm. That would be fun. Okay. Do you want to start?
Sure. So our first one is from Kim Clark, who we adore, who says, "Can I just say as well? In a long list of podcasts to catch up on, I always float this one to the top and listen as soon as it drops. Daphne, Elizabeth, and the guests they invite to participate always bring a unique perspective on the topics discussed. They explore themes and aspects of analysis not often available in the podcast world, always with civility, care, and no small bit of humor, which make for rewarding listening. I always want to hear what they have to say." Oh, thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim. And our other one is from Kay Kelly Mack, who called us kindred spirits. Thank you. That's very sweet.
It is. I love that.
Elizabeth and Daphne have a warm way of drawing you into their conversations and savoring their discoveries. Thank you.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's a lovely review.
That is a lovely review. I actually wanted real quickly to say something about our process because I feel like a lot of people have been asking me about this lately. Mm-hmm. I wanted to say, and I feel like this has been a really fun thing we had this in Fathoms Deep as well, but it's been really fun in this podcast. So just so people know, we don't talk to each other about the things we're going to podcast about.
Right.
Before we're in front of microphones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, honestly, how most podcasters work. This is actually something that you established for us when we started Fathoms Deep, that you said, save it for the podcast.
Yes.
And it's so, just so you all know, like sometimes we will disagree or agree or just bring up different things. And then there's moments in the podcast where we ourselves are really discovering stuff in the process of the conversation. So just so you know, that is actually us discovering those things in the moment.
Yeah. There's no practice beforehand, and we rarely exchange notes. We have in the past on a couple of times just to make sure, like actually with Jane Eyre we did, just because it was such a big book, just to make sure that we both kind of had an idea of where we were going. But even then, that's tiny.
Right.
That's
right. It's mostly just right. It's mostly just bullet points of the things we want to talk about, but not actually what we're thinking about them.
Correct. Yep.
So we'll share structure, but we come into this really having no idea what the other person's going to say.
Yeah.
And that's fun for us a lot of the time because we learn a lot in the process while we have these microphones in front of our faces. Mm-hmm. So that's just a note about our process because it just was interesting. I've just in the past few weeks had a lot of people ask
interesting
about that exact thing.
I'm also terrible at faking like it's the first time I heard something. So
Oh God, I would also be horrible at faking that.
Not good. Or when, especially like in a podcast, if someone will make a joke and then it'll get messed up somehow and we have to like go back and do that part again, like we might as well not, because it's
No.
the timing is going to be off and my laughter won't be the same. Trust me. I hate that.
Yes, I know. And we do have that sometimes, especially like if I'm trying to read notes and decide where we are in the thing. And,
Yes.
and then I'll hear like one of your jokes when I'm editing. I'm like, how did I miss that joke?
I know. I was like, that was a good one. She didn't even laugh. Somebody out there is cackling.
Somebody.
Some
yes.
listener.
I guess, fine. It's not really for me. All right. Give me 1 second. I'm looking up our poll. I did a poll. I ran a poll of favorite adaptations.
I'm very interested to hear what the favorites are.
Yes.
Mine
Well,
surprised me.
I didn't just do general favorites. I did favorites amongst the ones that we are covering, plus a fill in the blank option. Okay. So as we said a month ago, we are naming these by the actress, although I realize that it's possibly a little bit more efficient to name them by the year, not the actress, but whatever.
It was the principle of the thing, damn it.
Right. This is Jane's story. This is not Rochester's story.
Right.
So the options that we had in the poll were Ruth Wilson, Mia Wasikowska, Charlotte Gainsbourg, and other. Mm-hmm. So this is how it broke down. 68% for Ruth Wilson, 24% for Mia Wasikowska, 5% for Charlotte Gainsbourg, and then in the others we got a lot of people, like a lot of fun conversation about older adaptations.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any standouts in that other category? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Great.
Gotta just cut out all of that. Gotta leave that be. You could go to our Twitter and find that poll and see the discussion and join in and use the hashtag. Can I just say? Sorry, beyond my momentary Twitter research abilities, right? All right, back to our discussion.
I wish a woman could have action in her life. Like a man. It agitates me to pain that the skyline over there is ever our limit. I long sometimes for a power of vision that would overpass it. If I could behold all I imagine. I've never seen a city. I've never spoken with men, and I fear my whole life will pass.
So yeah, Liz, we just talked about the birds and we talked about the women. Are there any like other general things that really struck you?
I noticed that every adaptation kept that line of Jane's when she's young, where she says, I must keep well and not die. Everyone was like, that's important though.
Yes. There seemed to be like a shared doc of bullet points of like what parts are important of when she's young. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Overall for me, that was because you know how important the young Jane Eyre portion is to me. And I felt like, yes, the things they chose were important and kind of the, and the pivotal moments for kind of showing. But I don't feel like any of them really tied who Jane Eyre as an adult is to those experiences.
Not very well.
Beyond it being like, what is her tale of woe? Is that what?
Yes.
Is that what in the latest movie in the 2011? That's what he calls it, the tale of woe. Mm-hmm. So beyond showing it as a tale of woe, I don't feel like anyone really made that jump of saying, these are her experiences, and this is how young Jane Eyre dealt with those experiences, and then tying that to elements of her choices and personality as a young adult later on.
I really feel that the Charlotte Gainsbourg did that specific thing the best. I think it's almost the only thing it did really well, though, personally. But it did that specific thing really well, I thought, actually.
Right. Yes, I agree with you. It did it better. Yeah,
maybe so. With the other ones, it almost seemed like they could have just left it out entirely. Like there was no reason to even start with.
Well, they wanted to show you that she had a tale of woe, basically.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Mm-hmm.
But yes, and I mean, and I think this goes to a larger thing. I do think, I mean, now the thing I said a month ago that I supposed as part of the reason why we name these by the actors. I mean, in each case, the actor is more famous than the actress.
Yes.
But also, even though each adaptation had to a greater or lesser amount the part of the story without Rochester to some extent, I do think very much that the adaptations have turned this story into a romance.
Yes.
What I see as a story of a woman growing and learning and becoming, and the romance
becoming
being
Jane
part,
Eyre, yes.
right. And I think that the romance is a part of that story. I meant to go through the book and actually see how many chapters are devoted to each part.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Totally meant to do
so
that.
Many of the adaptations just barely touch on her life with St. John, especially.
Right.
And her what ended up being her cousins. But that was very interesting to watch in the adaptations, actually.
St. John got off way easy in all of the adaptations. I'm sorry.
No, it's true. It's true. I think in the Ruth Wilson one is where we got the closest St. John to the books.
Yep.
The one with Mia Wasikowska, I thought St. John was the most likable, the most sympathetic.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Jamie Bell, he's a sweet boy.
He's a doll. Like, he's so sweet and darling. It's true.
Yes, and he was a little mean to her in the end, but yeah, basically Jamie Bell he's not up to the forcefulness of what St. John needs to be.
Well, and I think they just didn't communicate that part of Jane somewhat losing herself to this benevolent tyrant, basically.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. I do think that 2011 did the best at the comparison of showing the contrast thematically of Rochester and St. John, but yeah, the Jane part, I mean, that's more about the men. Like the Jane part, her experience. And again, of course, it is really impossible to take a book that's in such close first person,
yes,
and then adapt it where you're expressing that well at all. That's so challenging. I'm watching the same thing. I've been watching the same problem with Outlander. It's just very hard to do it without just having the whole thing just be the actress read the book, right? But there are better and worse ways of doing it. And I think that all of these movies make the mistake of forgetting that. Some are better at placing us within Jane's story more than others. But I feel like none of them quite got as close to this being Jane's story as I would have liked.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. I mean, I just think, we still see Jane as an object a lot of the time.
Okay.
I mean, I just feel like we're drawn often into Rochester's POV, and it's just not his story.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, I think.
And these are great. Again, 3 great actors that I adore. So it's like, yes, I love these actors and I want to see them act. But it's not Rochester's story.
But it's not. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm curious to know your favorite actors in each role.
Okay, I was going to say that for the end, but we can totally do that now. So favorite actress and favorite. So that was what I was going to ask you. Who's your Jane and who's your Rochester?
In any role that struck you.
Oh man, I was so ready for Ruth Wilson to be my Jane, and I am torn between her and Mia Wasikowska.
No, it's okay.
I am torn. I am really torn, and they do Jane very differently.
They do,
and they both. I feel like they both are doing aspects of how Jane feels to me, but neither of them gets it perfect. And they're doing different aspects, and both work for me. It's hard. It's really hard. My Rochester is Toby Stephens, and I just yep, he's my Rochester. And although Michael Fassbender really also surprised me, I liked him a lot better than I remembered liking him. No. Oh, God. Okay. Yeah, we're going to have to get in. This is really hard. We're going to have to talk about each one.
It's really hard.
Because there are. Yeah. It's also like there's aspects of it.
I don't think I have a clear favorite for Rochester specifically, because They all brought interesting things into the role. I just felt that Toby Stephens is just too damn handsome. Like, you're so stupidly handsome.
But you might remember in the book, when we talked about the book, I actually suspected that Rochester might be a lot more handsome than we think he is, and he's just so insecure and self-hating that, like, we don't hear from other people that he's not handsome.
I think that we do. We discussed this too in the book. Yeah,
right. We hear no. We don't. No, Jane.
Oh, from Jane being plain. No, you're right. You're right.
We hear the only thing is he asks her if he's handsome, and she says no, sir. But that's much more about who Jane is than whether or not he's actually handsome.
I suppose that's true. He just kept on giving her that crooked smile, and he'd be like, "Oh, you don't think I'm handsome? Or I know I'm not handsome, but it's like, shut up.
Right. Okay. Anyone who's not watched Black Sails and why? Or listen to us in Fathoms Deep, you have to understand that we do have a special relationship with Toby Stephens and his acting.
Yes.
He's the star of Black Sails, and that man is peerless as far as I'm concerned.
Peerless is absolutely right. Yeah. No, he's fantastic.
Right. I feel like in all, it's responsible for us to admit this part of of this discussion.
Playing favorites maybe just a little bit.
Right. So yeah, it just influences how we see him here, because we have, so minutely studied him play a great and not entirely dissimilar character.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, in all honesty, I feel like that had to be said.
No, that's fair. No problem.
Are there other actors that we want to discuss whether their one is better? I mean, we just talked about Jamie Bell.
I was just curious if there's one that really stuck out in your mind. They're like, yes, this is exactly how I pictured whomever it was.
Well, William Hurt, as much as I adore him, basically neither William Hurt nor Charlotte Gainsbourg are my Rochester and my Jane, and we can talk about that one. Yeah, I think that that film missed the mark in a lot of ways.
It did miss the mark in a lot of ways. I agree.
Yeah.
Although I think that I definitely preferred Charlotte Gainsbourg to Ruth Wilson. Was my least favorite as far as just portraying Jane as I saw Jane, which isn't to say that it was poorly done. Just
I get it.
It's not my perspective of Jane. So, in particular, I watched last night Side by Side, the initial declaration of love and proposal scenes, and Ruth Wilson's choice, or the director's choice, whatever it was, in that particular scene, was very weepy and very emotional. Yeah. And I also personally felt, as much, again, I love Toby Stephens, but that scene for me had zero chemistry at all. Like, it looked like a father-daughter scene, and it was weird.
I know. They don't really have great chemistry.
They don't.
Yeah, they really don't.
Which is too bad, because, like, the blocking, I guess, of my acting stuff coming out.
Right.
Like, the way that they were directed, you could tell that they were pushing towards some of that, especially later, where he has her kind of pinned on the floor, or this is supposed to be very sexy, and it's kind of, but
right. Well, and hilariously, those two individually, so sexy. Like, I've watched, Toby, we've already made our declarations about Toby.
Yes.
But I watched The Affair, which is a show I don't really like, for her sake. Like, she is amazing in it, and I will continue to watch it. Sorry, people who love that show. I am watching it for her performance.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and she is very, very sexy.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. In a very subtle way.
So
I mean, it's funny. In a very Jane Eyre sort of way. Like, she's a little bit trodden upon and not assertive, but feisty underneath.
Interesting.
Yes, it's true, actually. In some ways, perhaps her character in The Affair is more Jane Eyre. No, I think...
Well, and she had a playfulness that I liked.
Right. She's got that kind of mercurial thing going that I think the other two didn't have at all. Like, they played Jane too bland for my taste.
I don't know. I think my favorite was actually Mia Wasikowska. I think I really enjoyed her portrayal of Jane quite a lot. But she did miss the playfulness. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, you only get it in the one moment when she's leaving and he asks if she trusts him. But even that, she still didn't, like, she said it, but she still was a little bit too much on the side of meek for my taste.
I get that. I get
didn't
that.
buy, and again, they didn't really show us those parts of Jane, so it works like within itself.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
her, I don't have any argument with her characterization within the film. I think it's completely whole and believable, but she's missing one element, and in my eyes, a very important element of Jane Eyre. So it's like when he calls her a witch or a fairy, I don't really buy it because she's not. I need her to be. You need to have that fire within.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
And Ruth Wilson has that.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. What did you think of the adaptive choice for Rochester in the Ruth Wilson to call her a witch instead of an elf?
Does he not call her a witch in the book ever?
I think once, but he mostly uses elf because he goes. I mean, he uses so many,
Right.
elf, fairy, wee folk, green men.
Right.
Like he goes on and on.
He does all of it.
Yeah.
Interesting. I feel. I'm trying to remember. I feel like in the adaptation he does both also, but I might be wrong. I'm okay with any of it. I mean, witch does have a different feeling than fairy. Although, there's so many different ways that people look at fairy. So that terminology is also like, can take 100 people in 100 different directions as far as what they think that means and what that would mean about a person.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you and I come from a more similar place of looking at that. Like a lot of people would see fairies as something like, pretty and fun.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's
you and
hard to
I
get
both
that.
like would see a fairy as something that's like beautiful and dangerous.
I was wondering if there was going to be a better word because elf, you're right, has kind of this like
These have all been made cute.
they have
all of
it's
these
right,
things
they've all
been
been
made
made cute. I was thinking sprite might have been better for me, but it's still not.
But see, that might explain actually the adaptation is that witch is although witch doesn't generally denote beauty.
I was
Although
going to
it
say
does,
witch has such a negative connotation. I feel like now. I just feel like
not
that
always,
still.
right?
Not always.
Well,
it's true.
Not always. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways with our culture, fairy has become too cute, and witch has actually gotten a little bit sexier.
Okay, that's fair. Sure.
So you
And
see
the
what I'm
whole, like,
saying?
Charmed and what
Right.
was that other the
All of
craft
them.
or like
I mean,
all of that
right?
stuff. Okay.
Witches of Eastwick, like
Yeah, sure.
Once Upon a
sure.
Time. Like there's just a lot. Like
Okay.
there's just a lot more. I mean, but even the Wizard of Oz, you've got all the
Linda
witches.
the Good Witch. No, that's true.
Exactly.
That's true. Okay.
So I didn't track how much those words were used, but that would work for me because
I was going to say if it didn't even occur to you, then I think that answers the question. I'm not sure why it. I don't. I suppose it just felt a little bit more derogatory. I suppose, and less.
Oh, right. But see,
less
that kind of works for Rochester
playful, I guess,
too.
again. No, of course, because he's such an ass. God, he's such a jerk. I always forget how much of a jerk he is in the beginning.
I know. And
Good Lord.
they each brought out different aspects of his jerk nature.
Yes.
But yeah, he's always, and they each fascinatingly chose a different way to show how he is insulting to her and drawing her in at the same time. I found a really fascinating thing in how they portrayed the romance. I mean, I think that the Charlotte Gainsbourg, they really softened Rochester way too much.
They softened him a lot. You're
right? Like we
Yes.
already had Mrs. Fairfax like telling Jane about his woes before Jane even met him. Mm-hmm. Like we were already setting this up to like not be quite so shocked
Right.
by Rochester's behavior. I don't love that. I really don't love that. I mean, again, I don't don't want to sound like a person who's arguing for the way that Rochester woos Jane. It's horrible. I think we're clearly on the record. around
Yes,
this.
it's true.
We don't like this. But I also don't love softening it because
Right.
in a way I feel like that actually takes away from Jane.
Yes. Yeah. I actually, the more we're talking about this, the more I think the person who I feel like kind of nailed the asshole Rochester meets tortured soul, clearly in love Rochester might be Fassbender.
Yeah.
Fassbender, and when I first watched that one, I was like, he's too handsome though. He's too handsome though. But then
Right.
watching the Toby Stevens one, I was like, no, he's too handsome.
Yes, yes. We have a clear winner in the
Clear
handsome
winner
in the handsome yeah.
department. Yeah. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm so disfigured now." You're like, "Shut up."
Okay, so they made some interesting choices that I wanted to discuss.
Yes.
And I don't know. I mean, first of all, the Mia Wasikowska. Wasikowska. I'm just gonna do this. This is embarrassing. I am Polish. I should be able to do this name.
It's a tricky one.
I feel like this is the one that's the most of an adaptation. Like they put things out of order. They start with her running away. I had all kinds of feelings about them starting with her running away. Mm-hmm. I love that.
I really like that whole adaptation. I think it was really beautifully done. It's also the most beautiful, I think, of all of them.
Oh, it is definitely the most beautiful.
Which for me is great because, again, the writing was so beautiful. And I missed the writing, but to have the beauty of the scenery and the scores and the visuals for me was really great.
I mean, again, Ruth Wilson one is very, very much a BBC.
It is what it is, yeah.
Series, right?
Sure.
It is so that, and the film is so much a film, and then you can see. I mean, you can see just the time frame of the two films.
Yes.
Of the three things we see. I mean, because the first one is a Zeffirelli film. Like it is very much his aesthetic, and that I enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, it's just a modern film and did beauty the way we like to see beauty more recently. But they did it well. I don't want to detract from that.
They did. I was really impressed with the makeup on that one, actually, because they did such a great job of, particularly when we saw Jane next to the Rivers sisters.
Yes.
And they didn't look made up, but they seemed to have just kind of a natural glow and a natural flush. And she seemed to be naturally like pale and haggard and drawn and
monotone. Like that's what I kept thinking about. Right. It's like you can barely see her features except for her eyes.
Yes.
It was very interesting how they did her. But so I love that adaptation. It made me think about her leaving. Like, even though I don't think even that film got the full Jane-ness of Jane. Mm-hmm. And all of the phases and how they're all equally important, not just the Rochester part.
Right.
But still, I do think that leaving Rochester is the most pivotal point in her story. And I love that they led with that. I really do. I really love that they led with that. And
that's true. That does make it more her story, I think.
It does to some extent, yes.
To some extent, it helps with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there are two moments between them that I found fascinating, that they played totally differently than how I envisioned it. Mm-hmm. So the first one is after the fire, after when she saves him from the fire. They played that way more romantic than I expected. Like, they come very close to kissing.
Yes, which I feel like we got a little bit of that in the book. Like, she was very unsure,
right?
But felt
for me that felt a little bit more like workplace harassment than
okay, fair, all right.
Like, I think she had feelings for him already, but I think that made I read that as sorry.
No, you're right though. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, this is a story of that.
Yeah, it is.
I read that as like her being really uncomfortable by how intimate he was being, because it is. It's not just wrong morally. I mean, it's just, this is the first time he does this, and it's like, true. And it just should have thrown her off. Mm-hmm. And she's thrown off, no question, in the scene. But I just felt like he's just leaning in for that kiss way more than I expected.
Yeah,
he should also know it's wrong.
Yes,
like, so they just way more went. And this goes to another thing, like then the scene after Mason, the whole Mason incident, when they're talking and he's talking about being inspired by a woman that he will have to marry, and then she thinks he's talking about Blanche, and then he's actually surprised that she thinks that he's talking about Blanche, and that's when he starts going down the jealousy, the active jealousy road. And I just found it I just feel like they blurred the lines more than I expected, more than any other adaptations, and more than I thought. Like, I think that this one shows Rochester's hand way more.
And you're talking the 2011?
Yeah, the 2011.
Yes.
So I think that it shows Rochester's hand way more than the other two adaptations, way more than I feel like the book does.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that works against our understanding of Rochester, but it works in a format that's much smaller than a book or even a 4-hour adaptation. It does a better job of showing us Jane's confusion.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, well, and I really did like the way Rochester was written and performed in this most recent version, because I felt like it was the William Hurt portrayal. Like, there's no hatred to that guy. Yeah,
no,
like he's so soft.
You gotta hate him.
Sure.
You gotta hate him a little.
You gotta hate him a little, right?
Oh yeah, no, that one is really just a romance.
Yeah, it's true.
No,
and a boring one at that.
Right.
So
and a boring one where he's just way too much older than her, and there's no chemistry.
And yes. Yep,
sorry, people who love that version.
Yeah, I thought that I loved it. Remember, I think I'm on the record saying, "Oh, that's the one," and nope, I watched it this time because I was like, God, this is boring. Mm-hmm. But remember, too, I had watched the 2011 and been like, why are they trying to make Jane Eyre sexy? This isn't sexy.
Right.
And I read it, I was like, oh wait, hot damn, yes, it is. And I do think that the 2011 got the proposal and that fight sequence that I love so much. They nailed that for me.
I know.
That
I was very excited for you. I was so excited for you because I was like, the first two I watched, I was like, damn, they didn't do that.
They really didn't.
They really didn't do the fight.
And like at all.
Nope. I felt so bad for you because each one of them gets the proposal scene. Two of them get storms. One of them, we see the oak tree get split by lightning. The other one, it's just like split later, but nobody mentions it. Oh. I'm like, is this like, did they just cut out where they talk about it, or is this like an Easter egg for people who like actually give a shit? Like,
right, what's going on here?
Right,
yeah.
It's just like they're just like hanging up on this oak tree that's like split.
Yep.
So that's got to be a cut scene because I was just like, that's really kind of important. If you do it, if you're going to bother to have them do the proposal and then have a storm.
Yes.
And then have lightning and then have a broken oak tree. Mm-hmm. Seems like you should like have paid it some attention.
I really think that this latest adaptation, that the 2011, brought in that element of like nature and fairy and fate really beautifully.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and say that one is my favorite adaptation. It really surprised me that it was, but just like as a standalone kind of, it was very evocative of the, for me, the most enjoyable parts of the book. Not even necessarily my favorite parts or the most meaningful parts of the book, but evocative of the most pleasurable parts of the book, I suppose. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it very much.
I think for me, I'm still going to have to say, yeah, I have to split the difference. Like, I think overall that's my favorite adaptation, but I feel like the Ruth Wilson one is more Jane's story for me.
Interesting. I don't know if I would necessarily agree that it's more Jane's story, but there are pieces of it that I enjoyed so much that I didn't get anywhere else. I love what that adaptation did with Bertha.
Yeah.
Making her so like sleek and composed and beautiful instead of just like this ravaged animal that she was in the book. And then just suddenly turning was very compelling. Yeah, I enjoyed that very much.
Yes.
And it made it all the more tragic at the end with her there leaping from the battlements and just so, I mean, you can see so much of her humanity the whole time that it makes it more of a tragedy.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
It makes her more of a person, which is also important.
Right. That is very important. And it's interesting that people choose not to show that because, I mean, sure, Rochester, we are supposed to think that Rochester, I mean, he is a good person for not putting her in an asylum, right? Mm-hmm. That is a good, solid choice on his
choice.
part.
Yes. I also like the Grace Poole in this adaptation, too.
Yes.
She did seem very just like sturdy, solid, just getting the work done. Like that made a lot of sense for me in a way that Grace Poole and the other adaptations I never quite get.
Right. Well, Grace Poole, I mean, they don't even do the whole Grace Poole bait and switch thing in the 2011. Yeah. Yes, I think she is. And she plays Grace Poole where she could just be that, like a very matter-of-fact working woman or kind of menacing.
Yeah. Which I like very much. Mm-hmm.
Jane's confusion really makes sense in that one. Yeah, that's true too. I also like in the 2011, like now I'm just off the top of my head stuff I like.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah, let's just do it this way.
Yeah. We're just talking about movies. No big deal.
Yeah. I love in the 2011, I loved that Mrs. Fairfax is concerned, like, she's not judging Jane because she thinks it's wrong.
Right.
She's saying, and maybe this is how it is in the book, and maybe I've always, like, it is. It's like,
Mrs.
be
Fairfax
careful.
is legit in the book. Yeah, she's fantastic.
She's hinting that he could just ask her to marry him so that he could take advantage of her, which I guess is essentially what he's doing. But this whole, like, take care for yourself. It just felt like that. Like, he could say whatever to you to basically get you to sleep with him, and then still go marry the fancy lady.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because men of his status don't generally marry their governesses. And I was just like, that she just put a read on that is not how I've ever read it, and it makes
interesting.
Yeah, because I
That
always
is how
felt
I
like
read it, I think.
that's great. It's great because that makes much more sense, because you love Mrs. Fairfax the whole time. She's a lovely human being, and then I'm like, wait, why is she getting so judgy all of a sudden?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't feel like it was judgy, or if there was like that element to it. I think of there's a woman that I work with actually who's kind of like everybody's mom at work, and sometimes she'll say something that does feel just a little bit judgy and a little bit, I don't even know how to put it necessarily, but just like, hey, you're not my real mom, sort of.
Right.
But it always comes from that, I've lived longer than you, I've seen a lot of things, I want to protect you from the world.
Right.
So I always saw that in Miss Fairfax very much. So that even if the way she said it was a bit harsh or harmful, or, and I do think that it put Jane on the back foot just a little bit.
Right.
That her intention was very good. Her intention was to protect Jane because she cared for her.
Well, and one of the lines that each one of the adaptations preserved in that conversation is Jane asking if she's so monstrous for this to be something. And I love that, because I really do love that this is us seeing a place where Jane and Rochester are actually have commonality. That's true. That they have such a hard time seeing themselves as worthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also, I'm trying to remember which one. I think the 2011, I really got that sense. I mean, I think they all have this, but I feel like the 2011 one, it was the most stark for me, that you can see the moment where Jane realizes that Rochester sees her. That Rochester sees her for the parts of herself that she thought she kept secret. Like, we had, in one of them, we have that whole line that she says, I think that's the Ruth Wilson one, that she says, why can't we be like men? Like, they, if they have all this energy inside them, they can run and travel and do stuff. And
that is Mia Wasikowska. Yeah, she says that to the window. Yeah.
Oh, she does
says
say
to
that.
The window.
So, no, but I think somebody else also said it. One
That's
of the
quite
other
possible.
two said, yeah. And I love that then gets tied to the bird thing, like that he's. I think it is in the book too, but I just felt like the film did a really good job of it, of tying those two ideas, that she has this hidden thing inside of herself that is essentially a bird that just wants to stretch its wings and soar.
Yeah.
And that he sees that. And I feel like there's an implication that part of the reason why he can see that is because of his horrible life. Like, because of all the stuff he's gone through, and because he's almost like on both sides of it, like, because he in a way has spread his wings and soar, but not in the way he ever intended to. Like, he recognizes this in her. Yes. And you can see the moment where she's like, wow. And I like that, because that's a very Jane-centered moment. Then, like, that's a moment where it's about her seeing the recognition, not about what he sees.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Lot of sense. I do. Because that was one of the things that we worried about in the book. I remember you tweeting about this in the book early on, actually, about how sometimes it feels like Rochester is explaining to Jane who she is in that way that's like mansplaining that we don't like. But sometimes he is just illuminating her. Sometimes he is just...
actually seeing her.
Right.
Right. I do think, I mean, again, I think that the 2011 is more generous to Rochester than the book, with these kind of added layers of romance to scenes that I think were less romantic in the book. And this, I mean, I just do think
You're right.
that
They did all make those, especially when she saves him from the fire. They made all of those very romantic. Like there's no confusion here.
Right. But that one in particular, I mean, really, he is like, I was watching it and going, damn, dude, you're totally leaning in for a kiss, right? Like you all are really close talking right now.
It's true. I thought, yeah. Now that one was the most like overtly like sexually romantic, I suppose. But I actually thought that the Ruth Wilson, that was the scene that was to me the most just like emotionally moving and romantic.
Yes.
He had that beautiful line, which I wrote down, which I think was, and we agreed that you'd never be cold again.
Oh, right.
And then he
that's
puts
not
the
in the
coat
book,
around
right?
her. No,
that is
it's
not in the book.
Okay. It was very romantic. I was like, oh my God, kill me now. Yeah, that was very romantic.
Yeah, that's true. So they each decided to add romance in a totally different way. Like the first one, by just making Rochester a sop. Oh God, I feel bad saying that. There are people who like this movie. I'm sorry. He's just way too soft for my taste.
He's pretty white bread. It's true.
Yeah.
He loses everything about him that makes him interesting. He becomes kind of like
he's dejected. He has all the dejected like minus his fire, minus his railing against his own. Again, he's petulant. Rochester's a petulant man. Like, yes, bad shit's happened to him. Yes, there's a side of him that just goes into despair, but there's also a side of him that just like yells at people and bangs things around and stuff, and that's also him. We did not get that.
Not at all. Yeah, it was too bad.
Right, and William Hurt is completely capable of that.
Yeah,
he's capable of pretty much anything.
Yes, he's very good. Yeah, that was definitely a stylistic choice, I think, that was made.
Yeah, absolutely. So wait, there was something about the 2011 that I wanted to bring up about the two men. Oh, I love the choice of the whole arriving in the snow. That, when it's in the book, it's when St. comes through the snow to tell her about her inheritance, which I don't think is that. That is what he did in the movie. He did come to tell. I love that you hear the knocking on the door and she envisions it as Rochester. Yes. I love that. Because I feel like they did this. This movie was the only one that managed, to any extent, to really express this dichotomy of St. John and Rochester. Even though both of them were kind of softer than how I imagined them, and St. John really, I mean, yes, he says bad things to her at the end, but really, you don't get to see this kind of force of control that he's trying to be over her. But I do feel like that one moment of having her imagine it be Rochester, but it's really St. John, was a bit of like a nice shorthand for a little bit of hinting towards this, essential difference between them. And they do a good job of having Rochester see her and St. John want to change her. Like, I think like that difference is really,
and not
really
even
good.
Necessarily change her so much as just narrow her down.
Yeah, that's true. Whittle her down to the aspect of her that he wants to have be her whole being, which is what he's done with himself. I mean, he even expresses that.
Absolutely.
So they did a good job of doing the parallel of being like in love and pushing that side of yourself away. So they did it, but not, again, they did a good job of showing how St. John contrasts with Rochester. They did not do a good job of showing how both of them have such intense power over Jane in such different ways.
Yes.
And how she has to fight in both cases, succumbing. Like that she comes out of each relationship saying, no, I won't go down your road. I'm on my own road.
Yes, which I really love. She's such a great character.
Yeah. So I feel like, they did it to some extent, but not, I want it to be about that. Like that, this is what, for me, the essence of this story is that she is this woman who has all of these people, have all of these, she has intense relationships. And in every single one, she's influenced, she learns, but she's not swayed.
Yes, I like that very much. I think that's so true. She learns, which is so important for me for a character that I'm going to really get behind.
Right.
But she doesn't change. She doesn't alter herself. She just, I mean, she's not afraid to course correct, but she's choosing her course.
Exactly.
Yeah, and she'll take advice, but she doesn't let anyone else navigate, I suppose.
Right. And I think that. she allows each person to give her what she needs to open herself up to herself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And I don't think any of the adaptations got that. I don't think any of them really express that.
Way, just because there's so much we're so close into her POV.
Yeah, but there are films that do. I mean, and again, maybe I am judging them very hard because the book does this so beautifully, but I feel like if you just took them and other films, like if you went into this just with those words that I said of describing what I think the essence of the story is, and you hadn't read the book, you watch these films, I still think there are just films out there in the world that do that thing better with female characters than any of these three did. And I think part of that is because I don't know if it's an orientation thing. I don't know if it's a pandering thing. They all turned it into a romance. To a greater or lesser degree, they are saying that the primary aspect of this story is a romance. And again, it's I'm not trying to say romance isn't important.
I think it is a primary aspect of the story.
It's one.
Maybe not the primary, but certainly a primary.
Right. But I think these films all are seeing it as the primary. They're giving a little bit of service to the other aspects of her story.
Yeah. But you're right. It's almost equally a third, I think, throughout the book. A third
That's
to
what
her
I
youth,
feel
a third
like.
to Rochester, and a third to her time at Marsh End.
And again, even the romance part, even the part where Rochester's around, I wanted that to be firmly Jane's perspective on what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't have, we see Jane from Rochester's perspective in these films, and that's not what the story's about.
I also think in the 2011, we got to see more of Jane as a governess and how her time with Adele was specific and her own, which I appreciated a lot.
Yes, we definitely got that. And we got in the 2006 and the Ruth Wilson, we got more time of just Jane and Rochester talking to each other. And again, it's 4 hours versus 2 hours. So they had a lot more wiggle room to do stuff.
Well, we got more of the beauty of Rochester's language too, which I enjoyed. I think that they sacrificed that for the 2011 one to keep his hard edges.
Yes.
Which I appreciate because it's a really hard thing this day and age, especially to portray a character like Rochester as I always think of when there's that scene in the 2011 where Fassbender is playing Rochester. He's sitting in the chair and he says, "Yes, and that's how she charmed my English money out of my English pocket." I'm like, gosh, this guy's a dick. But he really is. Like, he is. And the fact that in this modern movie, he can still be... You can have at least some sympathy for him, because you hear about his tragic past and you see, God, how much he loves this woman. And I was very impressed that he could be so crotchety and such an ass and still win enough of my sympathy that I end up happy for him and Jane as much as you can be.
Right.
That was impressive to me, especially again in the present climate. I was like, I'm not sure how you guys managed to nail that, but I feel like they really landed it.
Yeah, I agree. They totally did. I mean, yeah.
And I mean, it's the Darcy conundrum, right? I mean,
I've read Pride and Prejudice so many times. It's impossible for me ever now to see any of Darcy's behavior as anything but just like a man who just doesn't know how to behave, like who's like so uncomfortable with himself that he doesn't know how to do things well. Like, yeah, no, I mean, you're supposed to see Darcy, in your first whatever number of reads as like, oh, you asshole, and then like, oh, now I understand you. But I've read this book too many times. I only see a guy who just is like stumbling over his own tongue because he doesn't know how to talk right. Yeah, no, I only have sympathy for Darcy.
Okay, well, I still have to roll my eyes at him in the beginning, I'm afraid. But
no, I mean, again, he says crappy things, but he doesn't.
Well, he's just so pompous. He's very arrogant. Anyway, another story.
Yeah, another story, which we will talk about.
Which we'll talk about someday.
Oh, baby, I'm waiting for that.
Yeah, I almost like it better when you have these characters like Rochester, who Rochester at least knows that he's a jerk. He doesn't have any of this like self-righteous in.
No, yeah.
You know, like he doesn't ever think himself to be the virtuous man on the side of good. Like he thinks himself a scoundrel.
Yes.
Which to me makes him more sympathetic, I guess. But that's very personal. That's very
right.
personal.
No, I also love that character. I mean, I love the character that is struggling with that. Like that, you know, again, okay, yeah, we can't compare him. We can't talk about Black Sails, but
it always comes back to this.
But yes, I do love a character. No, it's true. But Rochester he's like, he really, even the good stuff he does, he doesn't really see as good. I mean, I feel like he talks a little bit more in his own defense in the adaptations than he does in the book. Like really wants people to like think he did a good thing with Bertha. I love
Which he did.
Yes, he did. No. Rochester's not, well, he's a kind of horrible person that has a little kernel of good inside of him.
I wouldn't even say that. I would say that he's a good person who's an asshole sometimes. Like you can be both of those things. Like he is inherently good and he inherently wants good. He's just a jerk.
Yeah, I think I would lean that a little bit more towards jerk.
Okay. Fair.
I mean, I don't see him as like a good person who just misbehaves sometimes. Because he has all that self-pity. It's just, I'm sorry. Like, if he was truly good, he just spends a lot of time justifying his own bad behavior because of this idea that he had a crappy lot in life.
Right. Like, I was so put upon, I deserved to act this way. No, you're right. That's childish, stupid, petulant behavior. Right. And it's, it's bad. It's bad.
So I think that argues against, like, he's not a person who's just like,
I suppose I just mean to say that he's not villainous.
He's not villainous. Well,
yeah, like
well, he did try to get Jane to marry him when he was already married. That is kind of a villainous act.
Interesting.
I mean, again, I don't see him as like a super villain or something,
right.
But I do see. Yeah, I'm going to still go with my kernel of good. I think there is goodness in there. I think that he had the potential once upon a time. Like, I buy his story that he had the potential once upon a time to be a good person. He was dealt bad things, but then he reacted to the bad hand he got poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And that did take him down a road of being a much less good person. And I think Jane is his redemption. Jane is the person who shows him that you can even have crappy thoughts. I mean, that's again what I love about Jane is she is ultimately a good person who sometimes acts out and sometimes has bad thoughts, but she always chooses good.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the thing that is most comfortable for her. Like Rochester will choose comfort. He'll choose, or not even comfort, because he likes to be uncomfortable kind of emotionally, but he'll choose, but he's self-indulgent.
Very self-indulgent. That's a good word. Yes.
Yeah. It's the biggest difference for me is that he gives in. He gives in to his feelings of I have been put upon and so I deserve shit. I love actually in the 2011 that's in the same conversation actually, that he asks for her tale of woe. And she's like, I don't exactly know what you're talking about. And then he goes into his like weird abstract, like, and I just love that because I was like, okay, so you ask her for her tale of woe as if like that's something she of course has and you don't. And then she doesn't answer you really. And then you just start like going, oh, well, would you like my tale of woe? Because, I've got tale of woe.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was perfect for the two of them. It's like, yes, she had a tale of woe, but she's not wallowing in it.
Right.
And he like has defined his whole behavior and all of his life choices, including marrying her on what he thinks is owed to him because of his tale of woe.
Ugh, you're right. Which is pretty gross, actually.
Right.
Pretty gross.
So like, I don't think he's evil.
Right.
But I don't think he's good. He's self-indulgent.
I think that's completely fair. Do you think he's good for Jane?
Yes. I mean,
God.
I mean, are we talking about the book or are we talking about the adaptations?
Either way. We're talking about, Jane and Rochester.
Right. I do think he's good for Jane because he sees her. I mean, I said this when we were talking about the book. He sees her and especially in that time, like I think you needed someone kind of as damaged and exactly his self-indulgence is like a little bit what she needs. Like she has this fiery center. And so I think having someone who relishes that, who relishes the fiery center and finding it, like he wants to see it. He's dying to see this aspect of her. That she is so in control, and he's dying to see what's under that veneer. And I do think that both things are her essential self, but she learned at some point that to be accepted, she needed to just show the veneer. And I think that he's offering her, and again, this is part of the whole, this is why we needed St. John in this story.
Yes. Interesting.
Because St. John is, even though St. John and his sisters love her, they want that version of her.
Yes.
They want the polite, when he says, am I handsome? And she says no. And then she's like, oh, wait, what I should have said.
Yeah. They want the should have said.
Right. They want the should have said version. And he wants, and I actually love in the 2006, I love him laughing at it. I love when she says no, sir. And he laughs.
Yeah.
And I actually love that in general in that version. I love that he can laugh. I love that he sees the humor of her sauciness and the humor also of her unintentional humor. Like a good partner also can revel in when you're being unintentionally funny.
Yes, yes.
Without laughing at you. Right.
Without mocking you, just enjoying you.
Right.
Yeah, delighting in you.
Right. So I think that adaptation gets that balance well. Like sometimes he's mocking her because he's Rochester. He's an ass.
Yes.
and you can see the shift of where he's mocking her to where he starts. Like, I feel like in the mocking, there's always this question mark of like, wait, I'm mocking you, but wait, this is intriguing. This is something I've not come across before. And how that shifts to reveling.
Yeah.
I also love in those two, in the 2006 and the 2011, how well they depict like just how incredibly uncomfortable Rochester is at the wedding. In Toby Stevens is his face. Like I actually tweeted fierce. That. I was like, if your groom looks like this, don't marry him.
Yeah. This is a sign, y'all.
And I love in a 2011 how they had it be the fast walking.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
kind
brilliant.
of dragging her along.
Right. Kind of I mean, she's she wants to marry him, but just this like, we must do this so quickly because I'm doing wrong and I have to get it, done.
Yes.
And how uncomfortable, like that he's making her physically uncomfortable on the way to their wedding. It's just was such a great visual depiction.
Thoughtlessness to her.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, yes, it is thoughtlessness to her, but I think, it stems not from the thoughtlessness, but from just how under pressure he is in that moment.
Yeah. And that's all I suppose he means to say is that he's under so much stress and pressure that he's forgotten to put her needs first, which is why that fight to me was so great when he's trying to get her to rail at him and she says, no, I'm not going to do that. And in the movie he has, where he picks her up and carries her. No, I like that. But yes, just personally as a romantic scenario, very good.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like that because it was a beautiful visual depiction of how this is not serving her.
Right.
This marriage.
And so to have those two side by side, I think were really good. The way he drags her to the ceremony and then drags her back to the house again too, right?
Yes,
to see
which
Bertha.
is in the book, right? Which is in the book, and I love that, and I love you're 15 years too late. I love that line. I think all three of them. There were certain lines that all three of them used that I was like, thank you. And that's one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are very good.
I just feel like 15 years too late. It just so shows still, he's just so petulant. Like this isn't, it's not, it's about him then. It's about him and his disappointment and his because, every time I read or hear that line, I always do the math. Like, it's not 15 years too late for Jane because she was a child 15 years ago.
That's right.
Right?
Like a 4-year-old child.
Exactly.
Yes. God damn it, Rochester. Yeah, no, you're right. Well, and again, I was thinking of like those 3 scenes of like his physical relationship with Jane from on the wedding day, which is like the dragging her to the church, the dragging her back to the house again, and then, or I guess it's like that's the one is the dragging, I suppose, and then the 2 when he's so gentle with her and he carries her and gets her the water and something to eat, and he's like finally doing right by her, and then he gets all clingy and is like wrapped around her waist, and just like sobbing and completely desperate, and she has to, when she says "God help me" and physically pushes him away. Ooh.
Yeah. She's the
Man
stronger
needs therapy,
person.
is what I'm saying. She is the stronger person. No, absolutely.
She is by far
she
the
is
stronger
the
person.
stronger and the wiser. And yes, yeah, she certainly is. He needs her much more than she needs him. She doesn't need him at all. She just loves him and he loves her, which is like the one thing they have going for them, frankly.
No, I disagree. I do.
No,
think
I mean, that's a
he's
good,
offering
that's a good
her stuff
thing.
she needs.
Not by the end.
No, he's offering her a place where she can be the bird that outstretches its wings. He is offering her that.
She could have done that elsewhere. She could have done that anywhere. She was learning to do that. She had to get away from St. John for sure. But she didn't have to go back to Rochester. I think she went back to Rochester because she loved him and because
that is
she
her
was
outstretching
loved
her
by.
wings. That is her outstretched. That's her making the choice that makes sense for her. Also, you have to take into account the, just the time.
Sure. Yeah. That's
I mean, for a lot of women in these stories, when they inherit a lot of money, that's their opportunity to not marry. Mm-hmm. Because that's how you have freedom.
That's so interesting.
So she was choosing someone who she could marry and have emotional freedom.
I like that very much. Yes. Well, I loved the line they did in the 2006 one, too. One of the sisters, the River sisters, had this when they were like, I think it's a crime against God not to choose love when you've got it in front of you. Like, that should be the 11th commandment. Mm-hmm. That was a really good line. I found that very moving.
It's a great line. Totally not in the book,
Not
but I
in the
like
book
that they
all,
added
but
it.
I liked it a lot. Yeah,
Right.
I thought that there was something thematic about that's in Jane Eyre, and I think, that you're putting it beautifully. That for her to be in the fullest expression of herself was to be in love and to be loved. And as much as I would like to think that she could find that other places, older I get, the less I feel that is so, actually.
I'm not a big proponent of like there's only one person in the world for you, but I am a big proponent of when you find someone who's actually giving you, who fits your whatever your particular personality traits. When you find that puzzle piece that fits with you, there are other puzzle pieces, but if you find one, like, why go looking farther?
Yes, yeah.
You found your puzzle piece, you're good. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like her experience of him was that he was the first person who celebrated aspects of herself that everyone else had told her were bad.
Yeah.
There's a lot to. I mean, seriously, that's like that is romance for me. That's the highest romance. They're right there.
Yeah, no, it's good because I think it's one thing to say that I appreciate the romance between Jane and Rochester very much, and it's another thing to say that their romance excuses, his behavior or the fact that I think that they.
She doesn't excuse his behavior.
She doesn't. And I guess that's what it is. That's the thing that I'm remembering. Like, the story is really good about not excusing his behavior and about, again, his willingness to change and grow and to not just be an ass for forever. Also, he wanted to be better.
A better person for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And you're right. It was very redemptive for him. Right.
So now I'm trying to think which adaptation I think does the best job of showing her, checking him when he's of not letting him get away with stuff. Like, do any of them? I mean, again, the first one, the Charlotte Gainsbourg, like, he's just not much of an ass. So I don't think we're actually
not much to correct.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not much to correct. Yeah, I just really do feel like they miss the essence of what their relationship is about.
Yes.
With the other two, do we feel like either of them is giving us that message that that, you know, he can be an ass, but because we love him, you know, we come back to him.
I think that the 2011
does that better.
Does it the best? Yeah, there are some. I think the 2006 does really well in showing their companionship, but that's different from showing them checking one another.
Yeah.
I think showing that is probably best in the 2011, but you're right, it could still be better.
Well, and that might come down to some extent also as the chemistry thing. Like the chemistry was just so good between those two actors that they really filled that space. Like there's that space between two people in a relationship that if the actor's chemistry is right and the writing is good and the acting is good, that space will wordlessly be filled in the right way. And I think that some of it really comes down to that. Like that they're just that unspoken magic between watching two people in a relationship was just so there for these two. Yeah, I just think that did a lot of the work for us. I mean, because again, I would have loved for her to be more fiery than she was.
Right. She wasn't fiery. She was frank. She was very direct.
Yes, and I love that aspect of Jane as well.
And they brought that out really well. So just her kind of like that no nonsense and that, you know, you're not the boss of me, sort of. She had that very well.
Very well.
She didn't have like the spunk part of the playfulness.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was more of a frankness.
I mean, Jane's not an actively mischievous person, but she's not a person that lacks that trait.
That's true. And I think mischief is a good word too, because that kind of brings back that element of fairy that he's referring to.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're right. That wasn't showing in that
and Ruth
adaptation.
Wilson
That's too
does
bad.
that.
She did. Now that you mentioned it, she did. Yeah.
Just there's a few interactions.
Kind of slyness, that sly smile and the mischief.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Adele being so old in that adaptation was weird for me.
Oh, see, I think she was young and then she got old. Like, because you're seeing them when they're about to do the portrait at the end. And I was fascinated how they did that. Like, she's very young. And then, like, same actress, they managed to make her look so much older right at the end when they're about to do the portrait.
Know. I felt like she always looked too old to me.
Really?
So
that's interesting.
Yeah. I was always just like, why do they have a 13-year-old doing this? This is weird.
Oh, well, maybe that's why they did. Because they show I mean, that's the one time where you see them later when they have, you know, they have a toddler and they have a baby and they, you know, and they're doing the I loved the family portrait. I loved that putting that in there because for me, I don't know, maybe that's an argument for it being more Jane's story than the other ones. Like that's what Jane needed. Jane didn't have family. Jane didn't have people. Mm-hmm. And then the end of the story is not her talking about St. John. The end of the story is seeing Jane surrounded by the family she had created. Yeah. That she had created, like of her own will.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes. No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
That is a really, I mean, it's funny. That is a very typical, you know, this, you know, movies from this period kind of ending. Mm-hmm. And yet I feel like, you know, it's not like all of the Jane Austen movies that end with a wedding because the books do. But it's not that feeling of just like, okay, we've wrapped this up with a bow. Like that ending for me was so meaningful because it is such an important part thematically of this book. And for Jane as a person, like that it's always about family. Like she's rejected by a family. She has no family. She finds found family. She finds family that she didn't know is her family and is her family and has to explain to them why that's such a big deal for her.
Yes.
And then she builds her own family.
Yeah, that's very good.
You are mistaken, Adele, if you do not think to find interesting creatures here in England. There's a bird. It's a quite nondescript grey colour, and it's accustomed not to moving too quickly, not to draw attention to itself for fear of being beaten. It wishes it could be in a cage, but sooner or later, slowly, day by day, its wings grow very strong, and if you were to look very closely, you would see brilliant scarlet feathers hidden under its drab wings. Until one day, it has grown so confident that it flaps its red wings and flies straight upwards into the sky, and those lucky enough to catch it in flight think that they have caught a glimpse of a firebird.
And then?
Well, then it flies away somewhere warm and never comes back.
I don't think I believe in this bird.
It's true. There's one here at Thornfield in the gardens, if you look very hard.
All right, I feel like we did this. This was not the format we had decided on, and this
No,
format
but I
worked
liked it.
great. We're just like stuff we wanted to talk about.
Yes. No, I liked it very much.
So I know we always wrap up with our favorite things. Do you have of this 8 hours of adaptation? Do you have a favorite thing?
Maybe I'll just real quick do my favorite part from each and just do
great.
them really quickly.
Okay.
So and just going in chronological order, I suppose. So the first one was the 96. In that one, that was my favorite young Jane with Anna Paquin.
Yes.
And I think, did we also get Miss Temple in that one?
No, we get Miss Temple in the 2006.
In the 2006.
I think. And I
That's
wanted to
true.
say that.
No, you're
that-
right. But we did
that-
get Miss Temple there. Yeah.
That we do get, even though we don't get the tea. I wanted the tea. I wanted something bright, something to be inspiring in her childhood to show not just tale of woe, but actually there was.
Well, she
were
gave that
things.
speech about you're gaining intellectual
Yes,
independence.
that's true.
remember, which
That's
was
true.
really great.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the second one. So I liked Anna Paquin very much, and the beginnings of the 96. In the 2006, my favorite aspect would be that we got to hear more of Rochester's backstory, actually.
Yes.
I liked, again, how they made Bertha more human, and I liked that we got the story of Adele's mother, because I always really liked that.
Yes.
Also, that Parisian apartment, though, oh my God. Easily my favorite part.
Very nice
Toby
to
Stevens
look at.
shirtless, also pretty good. And in the most recent, in the 2011... I think that proposal and then the following fight scene were very good. That was what I wanted from those scenes, and the romantic element for me they really landed it.
Okay, for me, I think also Anna Paquin for the first one. For the second one, I want to say all of the intimate conversations between Rochester and Jane, but I'll pick one. I'll pick the one when she's going away.
Yes.
When he's giving her the money and just
Oh, that one. The more playful one.
Yes. I really liked the playfulness between them. It really, it sold them as, they didn't have the chemistry of the pair in 2011, but it sold them for me as people who would appreciate each other.
Yes, as companions.
Right. Which much ultimately to me made me feel, that version of it will give me more faith in Jane's life of happiness than just chemistry.
Yes.
Still a little, right, 2001 one, I'm still a little worried for Jane in her ultimate happiness.
Yeah.
When I see that family portrait at the end of the 2006, I buy it. I'm just like, she is happy. She is going to have a good life.
Good. No, I completely get that. That's good.
And for me, in the 2011, it's actually the conversation after the night with Mason is that thing where I feel like they shifted it for me, and he puts that flower in her hair, and I just feel like you get all of just the confusion of emotions that both of them are having. Like, he's so sure she understands him, but she doesn't, which really goes to his insecurity, and you really understand her feelings, and that's not as opaque, and also you understand why she would have them. You know what I mean? Not just that she would have a crush on him, but why she would feel like she actually might be the person who has a chance with him. So when she's afterwards also taking that flower out of her hair, that just all really worked for me as just humans are messy. Yes. And these two humans are messy, and this all makes a lot of sense to me. Just all of their behavior makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, this was a great road. This was so much fun. We have to do this again, is what I guess I'm saying. Is I love this discussing a book and then discussing adaptations of a book.
Oh yeah, that was really great. Okay.
This was one of the things we had talked about as being part of this podcast, but I think,
that's true.
Let's not do this every month because it's a lot of work. But
yeah, but we can do some Austen next for sure. Not next, but at some point soon.
Sometime in 2018, we will do some Austen.
That sounds great.
Okay, and speaking of scheduling, the next episode of Can I Just Say will actually be the wrap of Outlander.
That's right.
Yes, so I will be doing that again with Lauren and Barry, scheduling permitting, but I think that both of them are on board. The finale is on the 10th, but our next episode is supposed to be on the 18th. We'll probably do it on the 18th, so there probably will be a week between the finale and our discussion of the last 3 episodes, and I guess the general discussion of season 3. And then we're going to take a little break because of the holidays, and then we will come back to you in January. I'm not sure which week exactly, but in early January, and I don't know what topic, because we have not decided yet what our topic will be for our first episode of 2018, but it's going to be something fun.
We promise.
And a quick reminder that you can always become our patron on patreon.com/Common Room Radio, where you will get bonus content, including more bonus content that we're coming up with. We're going to do a whole new plan in 2018 of fun things that we're offering for patrons. And that includes bonus content for all of Common Room Radio's podcasts.
Yeah. And live shows with live Q&A with me and Daphne, which is always a lot of fun, where we get to hear other people's questions that they had about different episodes and get to go into some further details of things that we only got to touch on in an episode.
Exactly. So, so that is also something that we offer to patrons. And give us a Christmas present of leaving us a review.
Please do. Yes. Yeah. Become a patron, leave an iTunes review. Yes. That is how you can support us. We so appreciate it.
Yes, we do. All right. Well, I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks again so much for listening. I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive. Can I Just Say podcast is a Common Room Radio production. For more information and our other shows, visit commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can make a big difference. Visit patreon.com/commonroomradio to pledge support and access bonus features that are just for patrons. And join the conversation by using the hashtag #CanIJustSay and follow us on Twitter @JustSayPodcast. We request that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and you can always email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com. Thanks for listening. That's about it for now.
Yeah,
I think we've done Jane Eyre.
I think we've done Jane Eyre, yes.